Ba, ba, da, ba, ba, ba. And yes, we're back. You all know me by now. I go by the name of King Fred at night, and during the day, I'm a different person. This is the Vinyl Vandals' favourite five. And I'm going to pass you the baton down to my colleague below me, but definitely not beneath me. And he is
DJ Ridla, resident DJ for the Vinyl Vandals, record collector, radio show host, and tonight we're pleased to welcome
Whirlwind D.
Yes.
Great to be here, thank you.
Nice one. Whirlwind D, welcome. I am over the moon that you've decided to do with it. It's great, people are giving up their time this, we're not paying anybody, by the way, so if you come on, you're expecting to get paid, you ain't getting any money, so...
hang on a minute, we didn't discuss that.
It's for the love of hip-hop,
All about the love.
It's all about the love, yeah. So, for those who don't know, D, can I call you D? What
Absolutely, no, please do.
For those who don't know you, D, can you explain a bit about who Whirlwind D is? Not too much, because we'll want to talk later on. We'll talk about where you're at now, and then at the end we'll talk about the future for you. But just as in who Whirlwind D is, in how Whirlwind D got into hip hop, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So, obviously, Whirlwind D, known for a number of things. Obviously, I'm an MC predominantly. Been making music for, since 1990, which is when my first record came out, and kind of last 10 years started doing it all again. But also, I write for Record Collector magazine. I was a DJ on Kane FM for a number of years, and how I got into hip hop, well. Like a lot of people, it was kind of that early 80s hip hop electro series. It was kind of, I was one of those kids. I grew up in Rains Park in South London, and I was one of those kids that was kind of into everything. So I was a BMXer, I was a b-boy breaker, I did graph. I was rubbish at everything, and eventually the bottle kind of stopped on rapping, which I was vaguely all right at, and I honed over the years. But yeah, I kind of got into it through all the, through Street Sounds, dare I say it, Breakdance the movie, Turbo and Ozone and all that stuff, and then obviously Beat Street and Wild Star later on, like everyone. But yeah, that's really where it came from me. I was always passionate into music. I loved Adam and the Ants in the late 70s, early 80s, and I literally jumped from Adam and the Ants straight into hip hop electro. Never looked back since.
What I would say to that is, thanks for that nice little introduction to who you are. Everybody gets embarrassed when they're going about breakdancing in 8-1 and 2. I'm proud. I've got it. One of the first things I showed my son is a little one. This is break, and he loved it. And I just think, why be embarrassed with, that's part of our hip hop history, good or bad. I know it wasn't the best, but then again,
yeah,
lots of other forms of music as well. There's always been a sort of like a bridging part, and that was a bridging part for a lot of people. So
absolutely,
I'm proud of it. I think it's warts and all. People going about Vanilla Ice is another one. I think you've got to take it. Me personally, I think you've got to take it all and just say that's all part of the culture.
It's the history, isn't it? Absolutely. Yeah. And I like what you said, it was certainly a bridge for a lot of people, and certainly was for me. And actually there were some great moments in those films as well. I mean, Ice-T as MC Strobe and all that kind of stuff. So, Which incidentally was one of my early rap names, but which I nicked off a friend of mine, Nick, and I hadn't realised that he had nicked it off Ice-T and Breakdance. And when I looked back at the film, I thought I better change from MC Strobe, and Whirlwind D was born. That was probably sometime in the mid-80s.
So, Whirlwind D. As Whirlwind D, is Whirlwind D, that's not easy to say, is Whirlwind D a group? Are you solo? Do you have a DJ? How do you basically operate as a MC?
It's a really good question, actually, because it could actually be a group name, when you look at these things. But I guess really I'm a solo artist. I mean, going back slightly in time, in the early 90s, I was part of a label in London called Liberty Grooves, and I was in a crew called Solid in Mind, and it was myself and Johnny F, who also owned the Liberty Grooves label. And then when I went solo as Whirlwind D, so going back about 10 years ago, when I kind of restarted making music again, I've very much been performing as a solo artist, but backed by, I mean, every Whirlwind D record is a team effort. You know, I can't say everything on that record is mine. I work with some wonderful people. The people I work with are friends, the people I've got to know, and it's a little collective. So Whirlwind D is a solo artist, but all the recordings, you know, everyone from Jar One to Specific to Mr. Fantastic, Mr. Thing, all the different people that I've worked with over the years are all kind of part of that package, I guess.
Yeah.
And then when we perform live, which until COVID, we've done a lot of over the last sort of, you know, 8-9 years, that's usually myself and Specific, sometimes Mr. Fantastic as well. So we'll have to kind of 2 DJs, 1 MC, and that tends to be the setup that we go for. But as I say, Whirlwind is an artist, definitely. If you take any of my records, there'll be a plethora of people. I mustn't forget Roller Rock. He's always heavily involved in everything I do. You know, there's lots of people involved. In fact, I can see that Time Waits for No Man single in your picture, and you know, Roller was a very big part of that particular single. But yeah, it's solo artist with a team of people who that's the one. Yeah. And so I'm very fortunate, really. I feel really blessed actually to have such a group of people to work with, and there are some of them. Specific, Roller, Phil Wilkes, and myself, and they're the people that worked on that record. And I'm very, you know, to me that's important because it is a collective effort. Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Let's get into it then. So, what we do is we do this show called the Vinyl Vandals Favorite 5, and we ask people. It started out as being Ridla, what's your favorite 5 UK or USA albums? And Ridla kindly went into his underground bunker there, which is AKA the 5 boroughs, where he does his DJ for his parties and also for his radio show that he does every Monday night on what, Ridla? What's it called now?
Well, it was called Try Radio, but now we have a new name. It's called Method Radio.
Method Radio. So that's so Ridla came on the show. Well, Ridla came on here and started chatting to me and John about his favourite 5, and he picked the USA. So what we started doing was, right, well, let's ask other people. So we did it with Michael, then we did it with our friend, one of our sort of like, he's not a Vinyl Vandal, but he's an affiliate, which is James Watson from down the road in Darlington. He came on and he's a promoter, and he voluntarily runs a music venue in Darlington, the Darlington Forum. And he did a one as well. Then I did one. Mine's going to be released this Friday. By this time this goes out, it'll have been released. Nice. And we basically, between what we set the parameters of being your favorite 5 UK or USA albums. We will come back in the future and do other things like favorite 5 12 inches, but that's a whole new nightmare for another time.
That's even harder.
Yeah.
And then maybe your favorite 5 non-hip hop ones as well. Maybe your favorite 5 albums with your favorite samples on. There's so many things we can do in the future.
Oh yeah.
We're just working our way through this at the moment. So D, are you going USA or UK?
Man, it was a hard one because, you know, I'm a big vinyl record collector. I love hip hop from all eras, whether it's UK, US. You know, I was a fan of Family Quest and Junior G in '83. I was a fan of Musical Life and all that. And then, you know, Blade, Hard Noise, all those artists right through to Roots Maneuver, Low Life, Jess. So, and it's the same with the US. So I'm passionate about both. And I thought, I literally spun a coin. I've gone for US. Mainly, actually, if I were to give it a rationale, I think it's because I guess there are a couple of the records I'm going to talk about really grabbed me early on. And although there was some incredible British albums by the likes of the Demon Boys, people like that, you know, in the mid 80s, it was some of the US hip hop that kind of grabbed me first. So I've decided to go US.
That's fine, but you know we're going to ask you to come back, and you're going to have to do your UK one, so you're not getting out of it. We're having you back. Don't worry about that. Okay. So with that in mind, with it being US, what is your? Sorry, what I should have asked was, are you picking it as in 5 to 1 or 1 to 5, or is it just there's one more important than the other? It's just your 5 that you've picked.
Do you know, it's a hard one. I'm going to say partly picked in order, because it's hard to refine it to top 5. But so there's a kind of order. I'm going to start with the most and work my way down, but some of them are pretty close, to be honest. You know?
So the last one's going to be the one that you sort of love the most, or has most.
I know the first one will be the most.
Right, then come on that at the end, then please.
Yeah, first the best, second no.
What I'm basically trying to say is, I want your most favourite, or the one that means the most to you, to be the last.
No worries, gotcha.
Okay, for a bit of a drum roll at the end, you know.
And what about my bonus one that I cheekily slipped in?
You're not allowed the bonus one because Ridla's been naughty and he's been telling fibs. Right? Okay. We'll talk about that at the end. That'll just
right.
be it. Yeah, well, yeah,
Cool.
that's fine.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so remember that you're going. You're sort of going the other way.
Ridla's fault.
Yeah. Ridla telling tales out of school. That's what it is. Yeah, he needs to be with his hat on. Yeah. So just if you can talk about the one that's doesn't mean the least here, but I mean, you know what I mean. Isn't as much impactful on your sort of hip hop life as the others are. Yeah?
Shall I pull it out now?
Yeah, pull it out.
Okay. So, I mean, it's an incredible album.
Okay, good enough.
Breaking Atoms by Main Source.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, I might have to just flash it at you and then crack on, yeah, rather than...
You can do it any way you want.
You can
do it like that. Yeah.
I'll put it, so, I guess I was looking at this and I realised when I pick favourite albums,
yeah,
I mean, I love hip-hop so much. There's so many great eras, like I say, but I tend towards the 80s so much that I thought I need to pick a 90s album. I got to 4 and I thought these are all from the 80s. I've got to pick something from the 90s. So in a way, that's where this one came from, because I thought to myself, okay, what album in the 90s and the kind of 90s-ish golden age, you know, those kind of early 90s years would I choose? And I went for Main Source. And I went for them for a couple of reasons. Firstly, for me, Breaking Atoms is one of those albums that is start to finish, every track is brilliant. And to me, there aren't many albums that do that. I mean, actually, the albums I've chosen today are all pretty much fit in that category. But Breaking Atoms, every track is an absolute banger. You know, and as you'll know, they had, you know, lots of 12 inches, looking at the front door, pieces of words play, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Every single 12 was fantastic as well. So, you know, Main Source to me, it's a perfectly put together album. It's an album that really takes me back to that early 90s. So, you know, early 90s for me was when I was part of Liberty Grooves living in London. And you know, I spent a lot of time at the shop because we had a record shop as well in Tooting, and it just takes me back to that kind of era. You know, when we'd hang out in the shop, you'd have Big Ted on the desk as well. You'd have all you know, people. Liberty Grooves was one of those places, and I'm digressing slightly. We'll come back to the album, but it was one of those places where everybody just hung out. And, you know, we'd be in there dropping a freestyle, and you'd have, you know, Dexter would walk in, or Agent Access from Corporation, and people had just, nobody bought records. That was why the shop shut down eventually, because everybody was too busy freestyling. But that album really reminds me of that era. And, you know, we had some great moments, and some of the instrumentals that are on that album take me back to, we had a big jam in 92, 93, I think it was, where we had everyone from Brain Tax, Def Tex, Lords of Rap, MC Mello. We had Little Rodney C come over from the States, and all, you know, 279, Cutmaster Swift. And for me, it was one of, in those early years, what I call my early years of hip hop recording, it was just, that was the moment. And music like the music that's on Breaking Atoms, for me really encapsulates that time, because that was the sound. And interestingly, actually, it does then come to the current day. Possibly another thing that pointed me in the direction of it is myself, Specific, and Jabba the Cut, and also an artist called Doozer, who's associated with Beeline Recordings. We had the pleasure of supporting Main Source. When was it? I think it was 2017 in Brighton. And you know what? They're one of those crews who you never know what you're going to get when you see a crew years later. They were spot on. I mean, Extra P smashed it. K-Cut, we spent a lot of time with K-Cut. He was absolutely lovely. It was a great night. Had other people like Nick the Exotic and other kind of Main Source affiliates there as well. But yeah, so for me, there's a lot of memories with that record, both past and present, and it is just a solid, perfectly put together record, in my opinion.
Nice one. Good.
And Extra P, probably my favourite producer of the 90s.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ridla, anything to say?
Well, you've got to choose your favourite cut off the album.
Yeah.
Oh, now, see, that's a hard one because there are so many good tracks. Can I pick two favourites? Because one is going to be a non-12-inch favourite.
One.
All right.
One album, one track.
Well, it would have to be Live at the Barbecue, wouldn't it? Because that is just one of those epic, game-changing records. So I'd have to pick Live at the Barbecue.
Okay.
But if I were to pick a second, which would break your rule,
I didn't ask that.
that's only on the album.
Move along.
I picked Vamos Arabia. I don't know if I said that correctly, but I love that tune. It's just got a real nice kind of bounce to it.
I think the thing is, as well, is because you're picking your favourite albums, you are going to love more than one track on the album. Of course you are. You're not just going to have one favourite, but it's just, obviously, we'll be here all day if you talk about the whole album from start to finish.
Every track on that album's a banger. Every track.
Of course, and I get that. Okay. I'll be honest, I've got it, and I do play it, but it's not a one I play a lot. So that's
okay.
What about you, Ridla? Do you play it a lot? Or
I've got quite a few of the 12s, and I like the 12s of it.
Right.
Obviously, Live at the Barbecue it's a party. It'll shut down any party. It's a brilliant. But I also like. I mean, we discussed it because it was on Smooth's list as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Watch Roger do his thing. I love the intro on that.
Yeah.
Whoa. You still there?
I'm there.
And then the scratch in really good.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because Ridla's the one that buys 12 inches and I buy albums more. Yeah. So
it's funny you say that because I used to be like that. I did buy the albums, but I really focused on the 12s. But then a few years ago, probably about 15 years ago, I thought, man, I got some missing albums. And I went back and scooped them all. So I kind of cover both now.
I think as well, when hip hop was out for me as well, I either didn't have a job or I had a very, very low paid job. And then by the time 90 came, 91, my daughter was coming along. And then, obviously your money starts, and then trying to have somewhere to live and paying for all that. I didn't have much money. So it became a case of having lots of tapes, like taping off other people. You know what I mean? Getting tapes sent to me from London and from abroad, like America. And then also, I felt as though if I bought an album, at least it wasn't the same version as a 12-inch, but at least I have some kind of version, like 3 or 4 off an album. So like if Ice Cube was bringing an album out, for instance, at least I'd have about 3 songs that he was going to bring out as a single on the album. And it was cheaper than buying the 12 inches and the album, So that's where I come from. It's just interesting because when me and Ridla talk, Ridla always tends to say, yeah, I've got the 12 inches off the album. And I'll say, right, yeah, I've got the album and I haven't got the 12 inches. You know what I mean? So sometimes I haven't heard the 12-inch versions of some of the songs that I've got until I've been somewhere. Do you know what I mean? And Ridla will have them and I'll hear, I've never heard that version before. And that's because it's a 12-inch, It's just interesting, I find.
It is. I agree. Yeah.
But doing this, and then you're seeing people choosing the albums, you're straight on to Discogs, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He's downstairs and doesn't know.
Mine's not back yet.
Okay, nice one. What's your next pick?
Okay, so my next pick would be And this is a difficult one to call forth because it's so good. I would have to pick Big Daddy Kane, Long Live the Cane.
Long live the Cane. Okay.
So for me, I mean, probably definitely my favourite collective all time is the Juice Crew All Stars. I'm a huge fan. You may have seen I did a big thing on them in Record Collector a few years ago, partly because I've just always been a huge fan. Went to the Cold Chillin' World Tour back in the day, and I was, I was into the Juice Crew from day dot, from the early Shantae and Craig G records and MC Shan records all the way through. And for me, Big Daddy Kane, when he came out with Get Into It, his first 12 on Prism, it signalled that kind of changing of the guards. So there's another Juice Crew member who I'll mention later, who's probably my favourite Juice Crew MC. And pre Big Daddy Kane, he was kind of running the show. I'm kind of giving a clue to who it is now. But of course, Big Daddy Kane, when Kane and G-Rap came along, I mean, also G-Rap have been around for a little while already, they kind of took that mantle. And for me, Big Daddy Kane, he just embodied so much. I mean, his skill on the mic, his patterns, his metaphor, I hadn't heard, he was, I mean, I haven't picked an Eric B. and Rakim album. I could have picked an Eric B. and Rakim album.
See what he did there, Ridla? He's got another album in there, another sneaky little. I'm watching. I'm writing these down, man. Go on.
I'm slipping them in. But like Rakim, Kane, and obviously they had that rivalry, or supposed rivalry, for a number of years. But those two MCs were just groundbreaking in terms of, they changed the MCing game. And I was getting into MCing around that time. And for me, I would listen to people like Big Daddy Kane, and I was just in awe. And, and that's what I love about hip hop, because hip hop's so dynamic. And that's not to knock the MCs who came before, but the style of MCing continues to change and develop. And I think of artists like on Beeline, the label I'm on, like Chrome, for example, who to me is one of the best spitters in the game, period, now. And Chrome, his patterns, his cadence, but also the meaning, he combines those patterns with a depth of meaning. He's not just repeating lots of words that don't mean anything. And Kane, for me, in a different era, was the same. And Kane just redefined hip hop. And Wrath of Kane said it. I mean, Wrath of Kane isn't on that particular album, but Set It Off, Ain't No Half Steppin', Raw. I mean, those records are just spine tinglers. So, I had to pick that album.
I get you. I suppose for me, about Big Daddy Kane is, I think I've got 3 albums in a best of album or something like that, or maybe it's 4 albums. Can't remember. I'll have to check. They're all on CD. I don't think I've got them on vinyl, but they're all on CD. My only complaint about Kane is he's got a lot of sort of like, to me, it's like fillers on his albums that I'm like, ugh. I always feel a bit, like the sort of lovey-dovey ones, like
love songs.
Yeah,
it is fair to say. Yeah, I mean, if you listen to Long Live the Cane, it's got the love song. I don't think it had one hip house song, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But I guess that was endemic of the time. Kind of 88 onwards, and particularly on Cold Chillin' and the Juice Crew albums, they all had to have a love song. They all had to have a hip house. I mean, Craig G took it to another level with his album, with Dopest Duo on, because of course he had about 4 house songs. But having said that, those tracks aside, they're phenomenal records for me, and all those Juice Crew albums, I just love, absolutely love.
Okay. Yeah, anybody who knows me knows I do like the Juice Crew. I was always a BDP-er, do you know what I mean? Like, above the Juice Crew. However, individually, some of the other Juice Crew members are like a lot more. So I love Cool G Rap, and absolutely love Master Ace. You know what I mean? Like, I constantly still to this day play his albums because I just love them. And he's still bringing good albums out now.
I agree, Master Ace. I mean, he's done that trick of staying relevant.
Yeah.
I've got pretty much every record Ace has dropped, and he could have been in my top 5. He's incredible. Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you, Juice Crew. Also, obviously, Roxanne Shante, because I think she's absolutely mint. Although she didn't last very long. When she was there, she was mint. So I'm with you on that. What about you, Ridla?
definitely Kane for me, and Marseilles. Yeah,
right,
definitely.
okay, cool. What's your favourite song off there, then?
A favourite song off that particular album, I think, God, that is a tough one. I think I'm going to pick Raw. And the reason I'm going to pick Raw is when that dropped on Prism, it obviously came out on the 12-inch on Prism first with Word to the Mother on the flip. The shorter version, I suppose, the long version on the album. That was a game-changing record. You know, that, I mean, Get Into It was great, but Raw, that the way Marley kind of hooked that kind of those bass and drums up so it's slightly distorted and you know, almost a bit like, I mean, it's nothing like a Miami bass record, but in the same way that MCAD, when he created Miami bass, you know, kind of messed up that bass. Well, Marley did it in a different way on Raw, and that the warmth and fuzziness of that bass line, I just, I can't get enough of Raw. I mean, that is, I think I've owned about 3 copies, because although I treat my records with like beautifully, you know, I'm not like a DJ with my records, I'm very careful, but I've worn out about 3 copies of that record. So I'm going for Raw. It's got to be Raw, man.
Nice one.
Yeah, got to agree with that.
So, Whirlwind D, who have you supported on your times in your rapping? Because I'll be honest, the only reason why I know of you is because of this guy here. He's always championing you, you know. He's always telling me, John, Julie, about Whirlwind D and all of this stuff. And no disrespect to you, but I didn't really. I think I've vaguely heard of you, but not heard anything by you. If you know what I mean. There's so many hip hop now, isn't there? You miss, and it depends who you. And I always do this, you know. It depends. A lot of the stuff when I've got friends with Ridla, I've known Ridla for a while now, but not really hung around with them at all until more recently, over the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And so obviously we moved in different circles, but you tend to see each other at shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm older as well, and I think because of that as well, a lot of my friends, and I've worked on the door for a number of years, like since I was 18. So when a lot of things were on, like nights and stuff like that, I never used to go to them. I was always working, and a lot of all my friends weren't into hip hop. So they're all into like dance music and stuff like that, you know, being off their heads on E and stuff like that, and, you know, jumping around like loons back in the 80s and that, whereas I was into me hip hop. And so I used to tend to go to gigs down London and stuff. And I think when people are talking to me, like, you know, say like yourselves and that, and, you know, all of that sort of, the scene that you were talking about there, like, you know, like was specific and all of that, it's Ridla that educates me on all of that, because it's sort of missed me. I've totally not seen any of that. But the kind of hip hop I was listening to was either American or different UK stuff. So I've sort of missed a lot of that. And I think it's also to do with and I might be wrong about this, but I also think it's to do with race as well. I think, like I say, we're going down to London and being with family, and, you know, when I go down to London, it's in the black areas that I go to, so I tend to listen to what they're listening to, and that's what they push to me. And it tends to be, apart from Skinny Man, there's not much in the way of white UK hip hop that I've sort of been exposed to.
By your surroundings.
By your surroundings. So I think that's something that I've never really, you know, caught on to until Ridla started educating me later on. I'm trying to think of who else. So Skinny Man's one. I've never really been into the guy you were mentioning before. Is it Brain Tax? And who's the other guy?
Oh yeah,
Brain Tax. And who's the other guy we always talk about?
Jess.
It totally passed me by, and the stuff I heard, I'm like, I don't really like that. And even Task Force, I never really got into them either. You know, it's only been recently that people been sharing with me as well, because people weren't playing it. When I was going out to London at the barber shops and places like that, people weren't playing that. So I wasn't around it and never heard it. You know what I mean? So it's I'm only learning about this stuff now. So for you to educate me now.
Yeah.
You and people on your label, if you were going to give me a couple of recommendations, what's some of your most popular stuff yourself that you think people have really bought into, and who would you recommend off your label as well?
Yeah, well, I'd recommend everyone, but I would, big up to the Beeline crew, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, of my records, I mean, probably my most popular record thus far is a track I did called Labels, which was on an EP called Beats, Bits and Bobs. And that was the first one that, that's the one, yeah. and that was the first track of mine that BBC Six Music got onto.
Okay.
And since then, it's, you know, it's been gathering momentum, and I've kind of noticed it in the digital sales and the. I mean, I've been making records for a long, long time, but since it was Craig Charles who played it first, and since then I've had quite a few tracks played on Six Music, so it's kind of opened the doors for me. So for me, probably labels up to now will be my most successful individual track. I mean, I was really fortunate. I've done 3 albums now, and my first 2 albums actually sold out really quick. The second one's the third one, sorry, is nearly sold out. I think Todd Hart, which is the German label that it's on, I think they've literally got a handful left. So I've been really fortunate, you know, over the years in terms of the way things have gone. To answer your question about people on the label, well, obviously there's Chrome. I've always been a huge fan of Chrome, and Chrome and I, in a way, I felt had a bit of a link, because he did come to Liberty Grooves back in the early 90s, and we met as mere youngsters, and then we met again at the Heroes of UK Hip Hop Jam in 2010 in Birmingham, and it was like, and I hadn't been on a stage for like 15 years, and that was awesome to meet up again. So I mean, all of Chrome and Ill inspired. They're a duo. As Chrome performs solo, but he performs as a duo as well. Incredible duo. Of course, my man Specific. You know, he's done a lot of solo stuff himself, and I'll come back to him in a minute to answer your kind of live question, because he's a huge part of that. But you know, Specific's dropped a few albums, lots of singles, and everything he does, I think, is absolutely spot on. You know, huge fan of Specific. I've got to mention my man Alex, Uncle Mike Nitro. He's got an album about to drop on Beeline Recordings, and you know, he's a great MC as well. In fact, he collaborated on my Falling EP. Because it's a specific, he's so good at painting pictures, particularly kind of turmoil and mental anguish, and the particular track was all about mental illness, and you know, we were commenting on male suicides, that kind of stuff. I like to rap about something and have a subject, and Alex painted a beautiful picture in that. So you know, he's another great artist. Have to mention Roller. I mean, Roller mixes and engineers everything, but he's also you know, he's behind the boards, and he really gives Beeline that sound. You know, without Roller, the label would be very different. But you know, there's so many other artists, Miracle and D-Flux. Got to shout out my man Miracle, because yeah, he and you know, Jazz T, Boot, and Miracle and I used to be, you know, do the radio show together. But there's loads of incredible artists on the label. So yeah, I could go on, and I'll stop because I don't want to bore you. But you know, I would champion every artist on Beeline. But I would also mention my man Mr. Fantastic, you know, who I've done a lot of work with as well. But to answer your first question, which was about live stuff, I'm going to go back to Specific, because he and I perform together so often, and you asked me about, you know, who we had supported and those sorts of things, and really I you know, a huge thank you to Specific, because Specific, who's, you know, owns Beeline Recordings, and a lot of us help him at various levels with it, but you know, ultimately it's Specific who manages to get the gigs, you know, he's done a great job of doing that over the years. And you know, we've managed to, we supported Public Enemy, which for me was a career high. That was in 2015, and
nice.
That was in front of 2,500 people at the Bournemouth O2, and that for me was probably the pinnacle of what I've done in music. Nice. You know, because Public Enemy, obviously they're going to come up in a minute, are, you know, one of my favourite acts of all time, and they were, you know, it was DJ Lord, Flavor Flav, Chuck D, Davey DMX on the drums. I mean, that was mad, hanging out with Davey DMX beforehand, and they were just lovely guys. And what amazed me, a bit like Main Source, they were so good live. You know, Chuck D's sort of well into his 50s, and 60. Man, he puts us all to shame. I was just blown away, and you know, I'm really excited about their new album. So you know, Public Enemy, we supported the Wu-Tang Clan the same year in 2015. Again, that was a 2,500 audience, O2 Bournemouth, and that was incredible. You know, great experience. We've also supported Grandmaster Flash. We've supported Main Source, as I've said, and then we've done lots of other. You know, we've played in Germany quite a few times in the last few years. We played in France last year with Jar One, which was great because I say Jar One and I collaborate lots, and that was great to get out to Le Havre. I've got to shout out the Le Havre crew, such a lovely bunch of people, Kester, Jar One and co. And then we've shared the stage with everyone from over the last 10 years, Son of Noise to, I'm trying to think, to Chester P, to Black Twang, to people on our label like Chrome Mill Inspired, Kashmir, Strange You, Kashmir. There's too many to mention. I mean, I feel really fortunate. The last 7-8 years, I've done so many live shows, and it's just been wonderful. It's been a dream come true, because for me, being able to perform live is such a key part of what we do. I love it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get nervous beforehand, but the buzz is like nothing else. And Simon and I were gutted when we had to cancel Rope-a-Dope, because we were going to have a Rope-a-Dope, which is one of the Beeline events in Bristol. We were going to have it in October, but obviously with COVID and everything, we've had to cancel it. So we've kind of been out of the live scene now for, I think the last gig we did was probably the last Rope-a-Dope, which was October or November last year, which was right after the France gig. So I've had the pleasure of a lot of live stuff, and I'm missing it massively at the moment.
What I will say, the live show is very interactive, isn't it? Maybe it's not the bigger ones, but the smaller gigs, you get the crowd involved, don't you? With your dress like a rapper.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it up at Lindisfarne, when you were on at Lindisfarne Festival.
Yes. Yeah, big shout out to yourself and Lindisfarne, and also the Bridge Festival, which was amazing as well. Was really you, yourself, and Sandy Duff and John Dyer, your link-ups there. So massive shout. But you're right. I do love interacting with the crowd. And I have to admit, I've picked it up actually. I went to see Format and Abdominal quite a few years ago, and this is before I was performing again. And I think they're brilliant live performers, and it was a real masterclass. And I remember thinking, I must do that. And you pick this up. So we do have a lot of songs, as you say, where we dress up and we got various call and response. And I used to do a routine with a track of mine called Pioneers that Cell One from the Gutter Snipes produced, where I would throw records out into the crowd and stuff, and that was great fun. I mean, obviously health and safety aspects, but
hip hop, who cares?
Absolutely.
Good. Back.
And just one more thing about the heroes of UK hip hop. I would just like to say a big shout out to Webster, who is Jason Webster. I think he is he sort of kick-started the UK hip-hop scene again for all of these artists that have came back out. And I don't think he gets enough credit for it, to tell you the truth. Because he had a thread, I don't know if you were on it. He was on the...
Heroes of UK Hip-Hop.
Yeah, Heroes of UK Hip-Hop website.
Yeah.
And anybody who was in the 90s was on that website.
Yeah.
And it sort of inspired a lot of people to pick the mic back up and re-release records. And I don't think he gets enough credit for it, to tell you the truth. And he's not about as much on Facebook and stuff, but sometimes he pops up, and I always say hello, and I always say thank you to him, because he put on 2 really good gigs as well. Because I agree.
That's what brought me back. I totally agree with you. Webster, he's a pioneer really in that kind of 2009-10 period when the scene sort of kick-started. And without Webster and Heroes of UK Hip Hop, I'm not sure I'd have started making records again. I totally agree. Webster, a huge debt of gratitude, definitely.
Nice one. We'll come back to that, but we'll because I've got something else to say about that. But we'll go to your third one, your third choice.
Okay, number 3. Well, we just mentioned them. I had to have a Public Enemy album.
Whew.
And now, what Public Enemy album do you pick? I mean, the first 3 are masterclasses in making records. But I picked Yo Bum Rush's Show. I picked the debut album because, again, it's about memories. I mean, for me, probably it's got more tracks on it that it's got a higher concentration of kind of almost every track I love, but it also really takes me back to the days when I used to go up to Carnaby Street and Beak Street. And I remember when I heard this the first time, it was in 4 Star General, which was in the basement of like a sports shop on Carnaby Street, next to the Ninja Weapon shop, where we used to buy our train stars and that. And I remember going into 4 Stars, and he would always have everything before everyone. And I remember there was a group of us there, and he was playing us this album like before it dropped off a cassette, and that was another one of those life-changing moments, because I had not heard hip-hop I'd heard Public Enemy #1, and that had blown my mind, but to hear tracks like My Uzi Weighs a Ton and Right Starter and all that kind of stuff, Rebel Without a Pause later on, it just blew me away. Public Enemy as a group, I mean, I know I put them as third, they could have been one. It's a really difficult one. they are on balance the greatest hip-hop act of all time, in my opinion. I mean, Chuck D, and also, because you get guys out there with messages, and sometimes those messages dilute over the years. Sometimes those messages start to not make sense. I'm not going to pick on any artist, but we can probably think of artists where they contradict themselves. Chuck D has stuck to his guns. He's carried on making music with that same mindset. His message has always been clear and correct, in my opinion. I've got so much respect for Chuck D, and so excited about his new album. I'm really, for me, if Public Enemy are making an album, I'm going to let it school me before I even judge it, because, it's Public Enemy.
Okay. What's your favourite song off that album?
Oh, so many. I'll pick My Uzi Weighs a Ton. I just love the clattering drums, and, it really takes me back to that kind of late Mike Allen era, and it's just one of those tracks you'd hear and you'd be like, oh man,
that refrain of "Hold It Now," I just love that.
Absolutely. And you saying that's just made me think I didn't put a Beastie Boys album in I should have put License to Ill could have been in there as well, but anyway, it's too late.
Okay, we just talked before about
I picked both of them.
When we talk about the regeneration of sort of hip hop, having another sort of cycle, and you were talking about, was it Webster Ridla you were talking about? Obviously, I think there's I never went to it. I always wanted to go, but I could never get the chance to go to it, because I don't like festivals. But the Boom Bap Festival.
I've never actually been. I'm ashamed to say I've not been. No, I know it's very good. I hear.
But does it still run now? I don't even know if it still goes on. I've never heard of it for the last 2 or 3 years, so I assume it stopped.
I don't think it is. Lee, who was helped with the bridge, Fred, he was part of the organisers for that. I don't think it's on anymore. But that was another thing. I think they brought Blade back. I think it was before the bridge brought him back. He done a set there.
And also the bridge, to be fair, we don't have hip hop in Newcastle at all. Let's face it, Ridla, we have very rare that we have people coming to Newcastle, do you know what I mean, to perform. There's not many. We've had a, shout out to, is it Craig from RPM Records? He's took his neck on the line with his money to bring some artists up here. But it's not very often what we have, biggish artists. When I say biggish, I mean as in, artists with from the USA with some clout, or even UK ones that are sort of widely known. We don't get them up here. That's why the Vinyl Vandals is the Vinyl Vandals, because we have to jump in cars and finish work at 5 o'clock and race down to Leeds to catch a gig, and then come back weary-eyed and have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work. That's what we do, and we're not even artists. It's just because we want to do the show, because we're starved up here. That's showing it, Ridla. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And I think, there has been things that people have done that have regenerated sort of like interest back in hip hop again. I would definitely say, you know, even though I'm one of the people that was one of the organisers and Ridla for the Bridge, I would definitely say the Bridge has been one of those things. I would definitely say the like, you know, what you've said there, and also Boom Bap, and probably some other things probably down south that have been going on. I think Son of Noise, what do you call him, Colin? Has he not done his
the Four Pillars?
Four Pillars.
Four Pillars, yeah.
Colin.
Okay. And also the Chip Shop, you know, shout out to the Chip Shop as well, because they've been putting stuff on there. You know, when I first heard about it, like when I went past that, I look in. So I've got family down in London, and I was like, people come here.
Yeah.
And then I went there and I saw DMC from Run DMC performing. I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then Elder Sensi and Salad X, and you know, it's just like, this is flipping amazing, because it's that kind of thing that you're just like, you know, wish we had something like that in Newcastle that we could do the same, you know.
Funny enough, we played at the Chip Shop, I think it was 2018, and I didn't know what to expect because it's such a small venue.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the vibe was brilliant. Myself, Chrome, Specific, I think it was the three of us. I'm not sure if there was anyone else, but it was a great night. Loved the Chip Shop, big up to Chip. But I've got to say, the Bridge was phenomenal. We loved that and felt really honoured that you invited us up there, and had a phenomenal weekend. You know, it was a lot of fun. Love Newcastle City. I'm ashamed to say the last time I'd been to Newcastle before that was for a stag do many years ago. And it was a brilliant stag do. All I remember is there was a ship.
Before you.
There was a ship with a revolving dance floor. That's all I remember.
Tuxedo Princess.
Yes, that's the one. That's the one. But going back to the Bridge was fantastic, and you know, you guys and Sandy and John, you know, you put on an amazing event. It was a great weekend and a real pleasure to be part of that.
Yeah, it's all about money in it, and also trying to convince people that don't understand hip hop. You know, trying to get people that don't understand hip hop, you know, what it's all about and the politics of it all. Unfortunately, that'll probably never happen again. Obviously, Sandy's kept that alive by doing it at Lindisfarne. I hope in the future we'll be part of something again, because it put Newcastle on the map as a hip hop place, which has never really been before. You know what I mean? We've never really had that, and you know, and it's just a shame. Hopefully, we'll be able to get it back again at some point, you know. But we'll have to wait. But we will, as much as we can, push for that.
Absolutely.
But also, shout out to James Watson, Darlington there at the Darlington Forum, because he's trying to do stuff there. He had us down helping support the Stereo MCs, and he's just been on to us today to try and get other acts on his actors who we
I remember seeing that actually. Yeah.
So in the future, hopefully we'll be getting people there as well. It's not too far from Newcastle, so we can just jump down there. About 45 minutes drive or something, isn't it, Ridla? And we'll be down there, so hopefully we'll be able to do that again.
We'd love to get up to your neck of the woods again sometime. And it's got to happen. Post-COVID, it's got to happen.
I think Ridla's are you there?
Definitely. I'm here.
Right, cool. Right, okay. You froze a bit there. Cool. Okay. Your next one.
Okay. Well, I said Public Enemy for me were probably the best group of all time.
Yeah.
I've got another sort of best group of all time, but I have to pick Public Enemy as the best group of all time just because of their span and like all the things I said about them. But there's another group I absolutely love, and it's this crew, the Ultramagnetic MCs.
Okay.
For me, Critical Beatdown is a blueprint album. I mean, it's just start to finish. It's how it's hip-hop perfection, late 80s style. You know, my only slight criticism, but in a way it's not a criticism because I've got all the 12s, is obviously some of the earlier 12s like Funky and Traveling at the Speed of Thought and Ego Tripping were remixed for the album. And obviously I prefer the originals, but in a way, because I got the original 12s, I'm kind of happy with that. But I mean, gosh, yeah, Ultra, Sedgy, incredible producer. You know, it Sedgy, like Marley Marl, my other favourite 80s producer. You know, he's so influential. Obviously an MC as well. Cool Keith, probably one of the most creative guys in hip hop. You know, ultimately hip hop music is an art form, and you know, you look at everything Cool Keith does, from Dr. Octagon to his Ultra Days to the way to his kind of consciousness, stream of thought, rhymes, just stuff that no one else would think of. And so Ultra, to me, in so many ways, were groundbreaking. You know, in the feel of the art, the music. You know, that I did a little thing recently on Cold Crush Radio where I did an Ultramagnetic MCs retrospective, and I went up to like 1996. So I went through the first 3 albums, and you know, and I did some of the latter stuff that appeared on the Tough City releases. And for me, there aren't many acts. Master Ace is probably one of them, but there aren't many acts who are consistently brilliant all the way through. You know, you got Ultra, right? Even their very first record, Make You Shake, which is not as good as Ego Tripping, but it's early 86. And actually, when you compare it with early 86 records, it's a great record. I know it didn't turn out how Ultra wanted it to turn out. It's still a great record. And then you get to Ego Tripping, and it's an iconic record. And yeah, so for me, I'd have to pick Critical Beatdown. I mean, all their albums are great, but Critical Beatdown is a blueprint on how to make a brilliant hip hop album.
Interesting. Ridla?
Yeah. So, what's your favourite track off that?
Oh, it's a tough one. I would say my favourite track off Critical Beatdown is probably going to be, it's an LP track actually, Ain't It Good to You?
Yeah.
Love that track. I mean, it was very close to Ease Back, I love as well, but you know, it's that high pace. They do fast rap. They invented fast rap, along with Big Daddy Kane. Yeah.
More on about this LP, because I chose that one as well for one of my top 5. The photograph on the cover is
Ridla.
Where it says Critical Beatdown, are they standing on other MCs down there?
Ridla, did you watch? I told you to watch it and you didn't watch it, did you? That Taxi Steve, All City.
Yeah.
Said G.
Oh, yes.
Said
He
G
confirmed it, didn't he?
Yeah, explained it on there. Yeah, that's why I told you.
I'll watch it then.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that's well worth catching, actually.
It is.
3 parts, really brilliant. Yeah.
3 or 4 parts, and it's dead interesting. I've loved listening to that.
Massive shout to All City Steve.
Yeah. I don't know him, but respect to him, like, because I love tuning into his stuff. Like, you know, get me headphones on and go for me walks and I listen to his stuff.
Yeah, All City's.
Yeah. It's well worth catching. So yeah, in answer to your question, Ridla, it's on there. Definitely is.
Yeah.
Right.
It explains it perfectly. And I'm like, okay.
It.
Yeah. So it's something for you to look forward to. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's your 5. Is that right?
That's 4.
That's 4. Oh, sorry, 4. Oh, I can't count. Keep us right, Ridla. Keep us right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you just want to mention your latest album? A bit more about that.
Would love to. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So now, and what's the future for Whirlwind D? Basically.
Okay. Well, the new album that Ridla's holding up is it's out now. It's on digital, Spotify, etc., as well as vinyl through Brickcall Romance, German hip hop label. Big shout out to Todd Hart and the Brickcall Romance crew. And it's my 3rd album. It's slightly different to my first 2 albums in that, being that it's on Brickcall Romance often have a focus on the past. And what I wanted to do, with this album, I was slightly nervous at first because I was trying to combine lots of things. But I think, thankfully, sales have shown and the reviews have shown that it worked. But my aim, you see, is I wanted to have some new music because I wanted it to be a new album in its own right, because I had quite a lot of new music that needed to go on there and new singles like Doing It Again, all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, it was an opportunity to put some of my really old rough demos on there. And the reason I was really nervous about doing that, but I was keen to, because of course my hip hop career started my recording career started in 1990 when I dropped my first record with Johnny F on Liberty Grooves. And we did the Liberty Groove stuff in the early 90s. And then I kind of had this hiatus where I never stopped writing. I think I did my last gig in 96 at the Brook in Southampton with Second to None, funny enough. And that was my last gig in my initial hip hop era. And then I went into the world of jobs and teaching and all that kind of stuff. But I was still writing lyrics. I was still doing them. But what I didn't have is a producer, and I didn't have, and of course back then, pre-internet, that was all important. You couldn't just hit someone up on the internet or whatever else. So I had this sort of hiatus, and during that time, of course, I started writing for magazines and doing all that kind of stuff. But what I wanted to do on Original Breaks to Beelines is just to bridge that gap slightly, just to say, look, I was still writing actually, and I've got probably 10 cassettes worth of stuff I recorded in that time, but a lot of it was over other people's beats because I wasn't a producer. I think the reason I was never a producer is when I was a kid, probably one of the reasons I became an MC is that I couldn't afford all the equipment like turntables and stuff like that. So it was only when I met Johnny F in 1989 and he was a producer and had an Akai, well, eventually had an Akai, and I think we recorded Original Break on like a 6-track or something, ping-ponging it, proper old school style. But it was only through other people I could kind of do the music. So with Original Breaks of Beelines, I wanted to bridge the Liberty Grooves years to the Beeline years, as I called them. And so that was the other thing that I wanted to do on that album. And also I wanted to collectively, like albums do, just bring a few of my most recent releases into it as well, like you do on an album. Might have you. So I had Labels on there, and I had Falling Down from the Falling EP. So the album it was multifaceted, and that's why I put the sleeve notes on there, because I wanted people to sort of follow that journey and come with me on that journey. So that was the album. And, a huge thank you to everybody who's got involved and copped the album and played it on the radio shows, and massive shout to you, Ridla. Really appreciate all that. In terms of the future, there's a lot going on at the moment, actually. So I've got 2 7-inches about to drop. One of them that will probably come out first. I'm part of a new crew called the All Stars, and that's myself, DJ DSK, Specific, a guy called Mr. Wonderful, and Chrome. And we've done this track called Juice Crew Law. And we haven't directly remade MC Shan's Juice Crew Law, but the beat that DSK's produced, it's kind of like a Joe Ron Bombay interpolated version of Juice Crew Law, although he's added some melodies in that weren't in Juice Crew Law. And then myself and Chrome on the mic, Specific, and Mr. Wonderful on the cuts. And I'm really excited about that 7. It's got a Maestro and Akil of J5 track on the flip. And that is probably out in about a week or 2. So that's about to drop. Then I'm in another crew called the Double Agents. And we've got a 7-inch drop in it's probably about 6 or 7 weeks. And that is myself, Frankie Raw on production, Specific, and Specific MCing, because Specific is an MC as well. Not a lot of people know that. He's MCing. And also Kid Lyrical from Australia. And that's coming out on Brick Call Romance. So we got that. And then I've got a few other little projects in the pipeline, and one of them is myself and Specific, because Specific and I really, we do a lot of stuff together, performing, recording. If a lot of the tracks on my albums that are produced by Specific, if they'd been on his album, there'd be a Specific track. If they're on my album, they're a Whirlwind D track. But like Dark, for example, on Specific's album, was kind of put together in the same way that Other Side that he produced on my album was. So we do a lot of stuff together. And when we perform live, increasingly, Specific picks up the mic. He started off acting as my hype man while scratching and doing, he's multi-talented. He's cutting and hyping. And then actually in France last year, he got out, and we Beeline Business, which is one of our singles that Specific produced, and there's a remix version on the new album. He and I performed that together live, and it just really worked. So actually, we've got a new crew coming. We're working on some tracks at the moment called SPWD, Specific Whirlwind D. This is an exclusive. I haven't mentioned this to anyone.
We're like exclusive, them with
So yeah, look out for SPWD. Probably.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that.
No, we're excited about that.
Yeah, so that little team up's probably going to drop in 2021, probably be on Beeline Recordings, but that's a work in progress. We're still, and in fairness to Specific, at the moment I'm the slack one because my job is so hectic at the moment. I keep meaning to write things and not, so that's coming. So there's a lot of stuff coming, and I've got a few remixes that people are doing. So yeah, a lot to come. Excited about the future, definitely.
Nice one. Couple of questions there that from what you've said.
Yeah.
If it's Beeline Recordings, how come you're then getting the guy from Germany? How does that work?
It's a really good question, actually, because I'm very involved with Beeline Recordings, and obviously it's Simon's label, and I've got to shout out Sean Dowling, because Simon and Sean Dowling are now running the label. So Sean's got a label called Hip Hop Bebop, another great label, and he's gone in 50-50 with Simon on Beeline, so they're running the label together. But I've always been very involved with the label, and I write a lot of the press releases that go out. So I wrote the Chrome press releases, and I'm heavily involved with the label, and I've released a lot of stuff on Beeline over the last few years. The reason for the change of label, in fact, my last single, which is just above Ridla with the big I, which is called MDM, Modern Day Media, that actually came out on AE Productions, the Mr. Fantastic's Bristol label. Big shout to Fanta. And the reason why they've come out on different labels, I'm still a part of Beeline. We basically, my previous single had just come out on Beeline, and it was kind of like, I felt, I don't want to, I almost felt I needed a bit of variety. And so, because I've got, some other projects that will come out on Beeline Recordings as well. So Fanta and I go way back, and we've collaborated, AE Productions, in the past anyway. And so I talked to Fanta, and he very kindly put MDM out. And then the Brick Call Romance thing with the new album, that really came about separately. So Todd, who owns the label, is also the guy who's taken us out to Germany a couple of times. So first year we went out there with Killer Instinct and the Dookie Squad, and then and that was myself, Specific, and Project C. And then we went out there again fairly recently, and Todd Hart's always done that. And so through that process, we've talked about doing music together, and I've appeared on a few of the Brick Call Romance releases in the past, like 32 Troop and things like that. And it just seemed right, really, for Todd Hart to put something out on his label. And in a way, because his label often has that kind of retrospective feel, because there's an aspect of that to Original Breaks, it felt like the right label to put it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Nice. Ridla, any questions before we move on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
Oh, you keep freezing.
We've got to freeze.
Yeah, it keeps freezing.
Yeah, we've got a frosty freeze.
We'll just skip back a bit. One is it's a lot about your rare records. What's your favourite rare record?
I think we lost you a bit there, but I think I got the end of that question. Yeah. My favourite rare record, man, that is difficult. I mean, I do love my rare records, but I'm not going to pick like a super expensive one, actually, because I'm thinking, what is my favourite? I'm going with the word favourite. And probably my favourite rare record, it's certainly not the most expensive by any means, but I'd probably pick something like Big Daddy Kane 8.5 Stepping Remix, because I love 8.5 Stepping, and that remix is just so hard. And it was one of those records that I fiended for years. I remember Johnny F had a copy when back in the early 90s, and I was trying to swap it off him for years before that record went for lots of money, and he wouldn't trade it with me. And then eventually when I got it about 15 years ago, I was so over the moon. So I picked Big Daddy Kane 8.5 Stepping Remix, I think.
Nice one. Okay.
Nice.
Thank you. Last record.
Okay, so my favourite, this is my number one, and they all meld. They meld together, so it's difficult to pick. But I would have to pick this album, MC Shan, Down by Law, from 1987. Technically, 1986 because it came out with a black cold chilling label. That's the test pressing of it in '86. And there's various pressings, obviously, but yeah, for me, this album, if I'm just thinking about pure impact and influence, it's all about this album. So I'm a huge MC Shan fan, and you know, Shan I think sometimes gets a hard time because you know, a lot of people got into the Juice Crew around 87, 88 when rightfully G-Rap and Kane were the kings of the Juice. But actually, you had Shantae first, the Queen of Rocks, love Roxanne Shantae. And what happened in the Juice Crew is the crown almost passed. And by the time you got to 86, MC Shan was the man in the Juice Crew. And you look at his early career, Bar Feed the World, which actually isn't a terrible record, but it's not the direction he wanted. It's you know, it's if you compare it to electro records similar of that era, like Masters of Ceremony, Crime and stuff, it's one of those. But Marley Marl Scratch, The Bridge, I mean, those two records, Marley Marl Scratch for me, it's my favourite record of '85. It is a masterclass in hip hop. The Bridge, even said G, people, you know, quote that record, Marley's production on that. I mean, you listen to other records that come out in '86, and The Bridge, Ego Tripping is one of those, and South Bronx I pick as well, great record in '86 as well. But The Bridge was so far ahead of its time. Yeah, it was a phenomenal record. And then Down by Law, the album, and yeah, Jane Stocker's Crazy Thing, a brilliant storytell rap record. Down by Law, an incredible 12. And then of course the album came out, and for me, that was probably the album I've played more than any album in history. I mean, if someone said to me, can you pick a track that represents hip hop in its kind of purest, most uncut form, then I would pick Living in the World of Hip Hop from that album, because it is just so rough, hard, b-boy. I feel that album was Marley Marl at his best. You know, I feel it was just so raw. It was so, I mean, Project Ho, the beats on that just slam. You know, it was just such a raw album. And people forget, of course, that was the album that got Cold Chillin' its distribution deal with Warner Brothers. Right. It was the first big hit. It was the album that did it. And Shan gets a hard time because of the Bridge War. You know, there's different narratives floating around. You know, people forget records like Juice Crew Law that came after, that were phenomenal records too. And I won't even go down that route. But I think, you know, as a result, I think people, you know, he gets forgotten about. Yes, what a record. What a record. But you know, I think in that early era of the Juice Crew, for me, he was the man. His style, his just edginess, his voice, I just love it. And that album for me, you know, was phenomenal. I absolutely, by the second album, Born to Be Wild, I loved. Play It Again, Shan was a duck. No denying that. And then he went in a different direction. He became an international pop star with Snow, and good luck to him. You know, he made millions off that. But you know, in those early years, yeah, Down by Law, I love that album. It's almost spiritual for me. It's just that it's an album that grabbed me. I don't know what it was. The voice, the package, the bravado, the battle, everything about MC Shan and his attitude at that time, 85 to 87 period, just had me. So that's my number one.
Okay.
The Puma cover as well. The cover with the Puma.
Yeah.
Tracksuit, and you've got the hat.
It's pure b-boy, isn't it? Pure b-boy.
So what?
Actually, it's Marley Marl's birthday today.
Oh, is it?
Coincidentally.
Happy birthday, yeah. Marlon.
What was the song that you said was your favourite track off that album?
So if I was going to, it would be The Bridge, except that The Bridge, the 12-inch version, is so much better. Although there are two different pressing. The Black Label pressing has a different version of The Bridge than the latter Red Label version, and the Black Label version has a different version of Jane Stop This Crazy Thing with the Jetsons sample in that he got in trouble with using later. But if I was going to pick purely an album, I'd pick Living in the World of Hip Hop.
Living in the World of Hip Hop. Okay.
Yeah. Love that record.
Okay. That's been very informative. Really appreciate it. We're coming to the last words now. You've told us what you've got planned, which is great, and I'm looking forward to that. A question that I've got though that I meant to ask before, and then I let Ridla ask a question. Then Ridla went off and keeps going off. Is your music still available? And where can people buy it? Somebody like me who hasn't got any of your stuff, I want to get your album because Ridla's been playing bits of it to us, and obviously I heard it on the radio show, on the Vinyl Vandals radio show that Ridla does. Where can I buy your stuff?
Okay, well, let's say digitally, I'll go through it. Digitally...
Oh, stop. This is the Vinyl Vandals.
Vinyl, of course it is.
I'm not interested in music that is...
Okay, digital. Let's forget digital.
CD or vinyl? CD or vinyl?
In terms of vinyl, I'm quite fortunate, actually, in terms of record sales with my stuff. And my first 2 albums are sold out. They sold out of the label quite a long time ago. You can find them on, what I would say though, I mean, the new album's still available at Brick Call Romance. They've got, I think, around about 20 copies left, maybe. And I'm trying to think what else would still be available. Pretty much everything else that I've done has sold out of the label. However, there are copies available at various shops. So if you go on Discogs, Suspect Packages have a few of they might have one of my old albums, I think. Discogs is obviously a good site. Vinylism in Germany. So it's available out there. The record label sold them, but you can still get most of it out there. And Discogs, I would say to anyone who wants to, look back, go on Discogs because you get the full discography, and most of the stuff you can still find on Discogs. Apart from some of the kind of slightly obscure, we did some show discs and things that were very limited, and they're harder to get. But you can get it on Discogs.
Another question I had for you is: do you know many of the artists up in the Northeast? Have you heard? Is anybody that you know of, hip hop wise?
I have to confess, I am a little bit ignorant. I know of Ken Masters, obviously. Ken Masters is a legend. I know of going a bit further north, Mr. Bose and that. I love Bose.
We're too far north for us.
I'm a maths teacher, not a geography teacher.
That might as well be Iceland to us.
But for me, I would say it would be about Ken Masters. And obviously there were, and the names escape me, but when we played at Lindisfarne, because we've done that a couple of times, and the bridge, there were, other than obviously yourselves, but I'm thinking of local rap acts. There were some local rap acts who were great, and I cannot think of their names now, but there's some serious talent up there. But Ken Masters would be the name I would, work out. I mean, Ken Masters is a legend.
So do you ever do any sort of like collaborations outside of your your Beeline crew? Do you ever do?
I have done. I collaborated with Oxygen from Atlanta in the US on a track called When I Write, which is my second album. I've collaborated with Phil Most Chill from Philadelphia on a track called Run Faster, my first album, which is real buzz. Big shout out to Fanta for hooking that one up, because Fanta puts out a lot of Phil Most Chill's records, so that was a bonus. And then who else? Mr. Thing I collaborated with on a track called Broadway, going back to 2013. Obviously Jar One. I mean, Jar One isn't part of the Beeline crew. I mean, we're close now. Big shout out to Jar One. I'm trying to think really. I've Spats from Criminal Minds I've collaborated with in the past, quite a long time ago. But there are others, but the majority are kind of people in our kind of fam and our collective. But I don't tend to do. I try not to collaborate too much. I like to have a sprinkling of collaborations, but I kind of like my albums to reflect as much of me as they can. I guess so. I'm quite selective, when I pick people to work with, because like on When I Write. When I listen to Oxygen, and he's got such a way with words, such a finesse with words, and that song was all about writing lyrics, and I thought he'd be perfect for that record, and he absolutely killed it in the track and the video, So so there's various people.
Nice one. Okay, we're coming to the end. Ridla, have you got any last words?
I just want to say thanks to D especially for also hooking us up with an album to give away on our radio show, which was a really nice gesture.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
It was well appreciated by the winner, Ridla, because that meant he had 2 copies, one black copy and one white copy.
That's what you want. Perfect.
Yeah, but just keep up the good work, I say. And we'll hopefully see you live again soon.
Yeah, hope so. Yep. Hope so. Yeah.
And D, have you got any last words?
Yeah, well, firstly, say a huge thank you to you guys for having me. It's been a real pleasure. I've also just want to shout out anyone that I've missed. I've tried to cover most of the people on the journey, but I just want to mention the art guys like Tibbs and John Dyer and Mr. Crumb, Ricky also, Paul Taylor, because those guys are a bit like the unsung heroes of some of the projects we do. Yeah. They put so many hours into those projects, so I've got to big them up as well. But yeah, big shout out to everybody I've worked with in the past, and everybody in this scene, because really we are, we're just one big kind of hip hop family really, and we've all got our little angles, and together you put those angles together and we've got this wonderful scene that we have.
Spot on. Thank you. Okay. You mentioned, obviously, John Dyer there. John Dyer, I hope you're watching this. You owe me a favourite 5. You said you were going to do it, and you're dodging us, so get yourself sorted and get on. And
I'd like to see that.
Also, Sandy, he's another one. Stop dodging. He was a favourite 5 as well, so get on. Okay, just to see...
I think it'd be too funny.
just to finish off then, we are the Vinyl Vandals. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Whirlwind D, for taking the time instead of marking English books, and coming on and giving your time up, because we really appreciate it. Time's precious to people who work anywhere and who also have families and loved ones, and Coronation Street like myself that I've given up the night for this. It's a fact. Shush. People think I'm joking, but I'm not. I love Coronation Street, so I've given up the night to do this. So thank you for obviously taking the time. In all seriousness, we do really appreciate it, because we keep saying we're nobodies. We're just some friends on the mic, as they say. But just like thank you, and thank you for obviously for people that tune in. Please share it as well. If you like what you see, share it and tell other people about what we're doing, because obviously we're only doing it if people are going to be tuning in. As long as we've got about 20 people watching each week, then we're happy. But the more the merrier for us. So keep sharing. And if you think if you've got a 5 that you want to talk about, it's not just about the rappers, it's not just about the DJs or the artists. We're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Joe Blogs in the street, like me, who's not a DJ, who's not a rapper, who's not a writer, who can't body pop. Likes to wear his hat slightly on the side, but that's about as much hip hop entertainment as you get out of me. Just come on, just let me know, and we'll definitely have you on. It's about everybody. It's not just about the ones who are on the stage. The Vinyl Vandals are all about community and coming together. The reason why we started doing this is to get rid of the boredom during lockdown, and also to support our mental health. We are strong champions of mental health and getting people to talk to each other, because we think that's really important, especially men. Men don't talk to each other enough. There's too much male suicide going on, and people living in silence inside their own heads, and we need to share that, and that's what we're about. Don't forget, Try Radio is no more. And out of the ashes, we now have Method Radio. Ridla's show is now going to be on at 7 o'clock on a Monday night from 7 till 8. Me and John are going to have a show once a month. Our show was supposed to be out this week, but it didn't happen. We're going to be having a show once a month, which is going to be like a hip-hop mix show. Our first hip-hop mix show that will be out by the time this has been done is going to be a Northeast hip-hop. Keep the faith. That's why I've got this hat on tonight. That's something the crew that I used to be in, which was about sort of like a, not on the B-line, but sort of like a little record label, sort of like, we used to put samplers out, albums out. We put about 8 albums out of Northeast hip-hop music, for people to understand that there is hip-hop in the Northeast, even though people don't know that. So Ken Masters is on there, shout out to Dialect. Super Nice, and lots of other people that were all on there as well. Sorry if I forgot you, because there's loads of you. But you know, you'll be hearing some of that music when we actually put our favourite 18 tracks that we've selected, and we'll also hopefully over the weeks, months, be playing other stuff. I'm sure Ridla will be playing stuff in the future as well from the Northeast, because we're proud of it. Please keep tuning in. Once again, I think the hip hop sort of gremlins have come in. The sound's going on Zoom, so take it from me to say peace to everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Whirlwind D.
Cheers, been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Ridla's frozen again. So I'll say
thanks, Whirlwind D. Nice one.
He's good at staying still.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Yes, thanks.